Stock sell-off on Wall Street as Treasury yields surged to 16-year highs above 4.9%. Asian markets opened with deep cuts and a weak handover from Wall Street. The GIFT Nifty also indicates a gap-down start for our own market. Crude rallies to a two-week high. Brent hits $91.5 a barrel as U.S. crude inventories fall and Iran calls for an oil embargo on Israel, although gains have tapered a little bit this morning. Bajaj Auto reports an operationally strong second quarter as margin expands and cash generation remains strong. Wipro delivers a weak Q2 revenue contracts for the third straight quarter, while growth outlook has also worsened. Indices Bank's numbers beat profit and NII estimates, while asset quality is at its best level in 11 quarters. FMCG giants HUL, ITC and Nestle will all report their second quarter numbers on an earnings-heavy day today. Other key earnings to track include Ultratech Cement, PBR Inox, Havells and Coforge. And U.S. President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu come to an agreement to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza from the Egyptian border. Biden also announces aid worth $100 million for Gazan civilians. Good morning and welcome to Power Breakfast. I'm Pavitra Parekh. Those are the top headlines that we have for you this morning. It is not looking good across global markets. We got a very, weak handover from the U.S. And on the back of that, you have all of the Asian markets which are opening with cuts and very sharp cuts at that. So what's really leading the losses this morning? You have the Hong Kong market, which is down 320 points. So 1.8% gone over there. The Nikkei market is down 1.7%. Kospi is down, 1.6. So it just across the board, you're seeing a weakness come through for the Asian markets. The only one which is seeing just a little bit of green is Taiwan on your screens over there. Absolutely flat. But for the rest of the Asian markets, it is cuts of over 1% that you're seeing right now. And Hang Seng, like I said, leading those losses down 1.8%. The GIFT Nifty will come up for you, and it is indicating that the start for our own markets also on the back of all of these very weak cues and, action from the global markets is likely to be sharply lower. So we have a 115-point downtick on the GIFT Nifty right now, which means that we could open well below that 19,600 mark. We anyway closed below the 20-day moving average yesterday, and now looks like it could be another 115 points in the red right at the start. So that's how the Asian markets are looking. But let's take a look at the U.S. as well, because that is where there was a lot of selling pressure. Wall Street ended lower on Wednesday, like I pointed out. The Dow Jones closed over 300 points in the red, 330 points lower to be precise, while the S&P 500 fell 1.3% and the Nasdaq was the worst. So it saw a cut of 1.6% at the close. Now, for the U.S., we have been talking about the moves in the money market. So the 10-year Treasury yield broke above 4.9%. This is actually the first time that we saw this kind of move above 4.9% all the way since 2007. The dollar index has also gone up. It's almost at 107. So the money market in the U.S. will be very closely tracked. In some more, news coming out of the U.S., like we've been pointing out, they are reporting their Q3 earnings. So Netflix reported a boost in the subscriber growth, and their profit also beat expectations in the third quarter. Tesla reported a top line of around $23.4 billion. But this is below what the analysts were estimating, because that number was closer to around $24 billion. However, their revenue did climb around 13% if you look at it on a year-over-year basis. So those are just some important earnings that I wanted to highlight from the U.S. But since we're talking about Wall Street, let's listen in to Saira Malik, the Chief Investment Officer of Nuveen, as well as Liz Young, the investment head for strategy at Sophie, talking about the Fed's rate trajectory and the big jump that we're seeing in Treasury yields. Listen in.
Where comments have been dovish and they've been talking about perhaps taking future rate hikes off the table. I expect Powell to come in a little more hawkish tomorrow. Inflation is still an issue. The employment markets are still strong. The consumer is still spending. I think all of that together makes him lean a little bit more hawkish. Our expectation is for one more rate hike on the table before the year ends. But with 10-year yields almost hitting 5% levels, they may be doing the work for the economy in terms of tightening that rate hikes would be doing. But I think Powell is still going to be conservative and leave the door open to one more rate hike before the year ends.
We got mortgage rates that are going to creep closer to 8%, fresh highs in the 2-year, and then all the chatter is about, oh, the Fed will be done, they're going to stop hiking rates, and that's bullish for equities. Well, they may not have to hike rates anymore because the bond market is doing this for them, but that is not bullish for equities, particularly on the short end of the curve. So if we were making fresh highs in the 10-year and the 2-year was slowly grinding lower, maybe a different story. We've raised rates so quickly, and now I think we're finally seeing some of it coming out in some of the credit spreads. You're seeing high yield spreads start to widen considerably, especially if you look at that at a time when the 10-year has risen, right? 10-year yields have gone up. You're still seeing spreads widen.
All right, that is some very important opinion coming in on how the Fed could move from here. By the way, there is a speech by Fed Chair Jerome Powell this evening as well. So all eyes really on that too, because that could be very key to track. But with that, let's move on and bring you the final update in our global market wrap this morning. We have weak cues coming in from Europe as well. So you had the French CAC index, which was down around 63 points at the close. And then, like you can see on your screen, the German DAX as well as the FTSE both saw cuts of over 1%. In fact, if you take a look at the Pan-European Stock 600 that we track, that also fell over 1% and we saw it close at the lowest level in over a week. The Euro Stocks Volatility Index also hit the highest intraday level that we've seen all the way since March. Now, in some key data to track from the Eurozone region, we had inflation, which eased to 4.3%. This is for the month of September from 5.2%, which we saw in August. Meanwhile, if you look at inflation, just the UK, that came in at 6.7%, which is a tad higher than the estimated 6.6%. So that's really everything that we're looking at as far as the global markets go. Like I was pointing out, it's weak across the board. But let's talk about how all of these overnight cues really impact us as well as the individual stocks that you should track. We have Ekta Surbi as well as Nigel all here to take us through the trade setup this morning. Guys, a very good morning to all of you. Ekta, coming to you first. I mean, I'm sure you heard us talk about what's going on with the global market. So the handover definitely is extremely weak today.
Morning. Well, yes, it continues because yesterday we saw weakness in IT as well as financials, which kept the markets under pressure. The Nifty ended below 19,700. 40 out of 50 Nifty stocks closed in the red in yesterday's trading session. The Bank Nifty slipped over 500 odd points. FII's net sold over 1,800 odd crores. DII's net bought around 1,469 crores. So that 4-digit figure in terms of FII's was back on the table in terms of a sell figure. The rupee ended flat, but it's still weak at around 83.26. Now, there is risk off globally, like you mentioned. So gold has jumped to more than a 2-month peak. Brent crude is holding above $90 per barrel, which is above 2-week highs. We have US markets which closed lower. That's because the yields have surged to 16-year highs. We had earnings such as Tesla, which disappointed. Asia, which is largely weak. GIFT Nifty indicating a start in the red. In terms of earnings reaction, we have Wipro, Bajaj Auto, LTI, Mindtree, Shoppers Stop. All of these stocks will be in focus. And in terms of cues for our markets, geopolitics will be top of mind. Besides that, any kind of impact in terms of Brent crude prices, what Iran's indication would be in the next couple of days would be important to track. The US Fed Chair Powell is going to be speaking on the 19th, which is today, so we'll be reacting to that tomorrow. And separately, a lot of earnings to watch out for, especially from the FMCG space. HUL, ITC, Nestle, consumption will be in focus on account of PVR, Inox, Havells, and even Ultratech Cement.
All right, Ekta, thanks a lot for taking us through all of those cues. That is everything that we should watch for in today's trading session. But let's also talk about the stocks which could be in focus. So it'll be like Ekta was pointing out, a lot of big earnings coming through post-market close yesterday. So take us through how they were.
Hi, so a lot of big earnings, as you said. First one is Bajaj Auto. It was a good set of numbers. The revenues were up 6% on a year-on-year basis. The EBITDA was up 20%. Margins came in at 19.8% versus 17% same time last year. Coforge, they announced their results just a while ago. The revenue was pretty much in line with the poll. Revenue came in at 2276 crores, but the EBIT and the margins were a miss. EBIT came in at 264 crores versus the poll of 300 crores, and the margins came in at 11.6% versus a poll of 13%. IndusInd Bank, the profit and loss beats the poll. The net interest income is up 1.4%, and the PAT came in at 2182 crores. Bandhan Bank, the asset quality has deteriorated and the PNL is also below the poll. The slippages came in at 1320 crores and the gross NPA came in at 7.32%. Wipro, it was a weak Q2. The dollar revenue was down 2.3% and the company has guided for negative 3.5% to negative 1.5% revenue in Q3 of FY24. Persistent Systems, it was a good revenue growth of 3.2%, but it was a margin miss at 13.7% versus estimates of 14.1%. ICICI Lombard, a good set of numbers, the premium growth of 18% on a year-on-year basis, and the combined ratio is now improved to 103.9%. And some other companies that may react to their numbers is Astral, Shoppers Stop, Titagar Rail, UTI AMC, and RPG Life Sciences.
That is a very long list of stocks. Surabhi, thanks a lot for bringing us up to speed with all of that action. But let's also talk about cues from the futures and options space. Nigel is here with that. Nigel, we saw a close below the 20 DMA yesterday. How's it looking this morning?
Well, the odds are stacked against the bulls, right, Pavitra, this morning. Whether you look at the yesterday's close or you look at the cues that we're waking up to, the yields, the dollar index, Brent crude prices, most factors against the bulls today. So today actually is going to be a day of survival. You don't want to see a very, very deep cut in today's trading session. And yesterday, towards the end of the day, well, you saw the Nifty bank that ended at the low point of the day, and that was the big drag. Remember, that played out expiry yesterday, and that was clearly weighing on the market, so an underperformer yet again. In terms of open interest build-up, well, there was shorting being seen on the Nifty bank because the Nifty ended lower, open interest was low, but the Nifty bank ended low and open interest was up closer around 30%. And the FI data perfectly collaborates with that because the FI has added closer on 15,000 short contracts. On the long side, they added closer on 7,000 contracts. So they added shorts to longs in the positions of closer on 2:1. The PCR, though, has moved down to around 0.8. Remember, in the past, we have seen when the PCR moves to around 0.67, 0.7, that's where the market bottoms, makes a near-term bottom. But yesterday, in fact, it came down to around 0.8, so it still has some distance to go. And why is that? Because the call writing has been very, very aggressive. The 19,800 call now has closer on 1.6 crore shares in terms of open interest. The premium has come down to around 12 rupees from around 70 rupees. But the 19,600 put, well, on the put side, that has the highest open interest. And keep in mind, the difference between both of them is nearly around 70 lakh shares, telling you the kind of aggression we're seeing on the call writing side. So let's go to the data points then. Since the 19,600 put has the highest open interest with 20 rupees premium, the support will come in at around 19,580. That's as per the options data. While the 20 DMA, that's where we ended at close to yesterday. And the near term, the 50 DMA is what we're looking at. The Nifty bank, well, that's going to be very, very important. Will it see some kind of a bounce? Because that one has been moving one direction. That's just down. The 20 DMA on the upside, that'll be a bit of a resistance. The 200 DMA, does the Nifty bank want to test the 200 DMA? That's the question that the bulls will be asking themselves. If they believe not, then they could buy the dip that we'll get earlier today. Otherwise, it looks in all probability that the 200 DMA is on the cards. Back to you.
All right, let's see how that plays out. Nigel, thanks a lot for laying out all of those cues for us. With that, it is time for our first short break on the show. But when we come back, like we told you, Wipro and Bajaj Auto both reported their second quarter earnings post-market close. So we're going to break down the numbers and bring you the fine print in just a bit. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast. Now, let's talk about some of the big earnings that came through yesterday post-market close. The first one is, of course, Wipro. Now, it reported its quarter two numbers. And anyway, this company has not been reporting very good numbers for the past several quarters. But this time as well, it was quite weak. So, Rima is here to take us through how the performance looked this time around. Rima.
Thanks so much for that. So it's a weak showing from Wipro in the second quarter. Constant currency revenue has declined by 2% on a sequential basis. This is the third consecutive quarter when we've seen a top-line decline. Also, the revenue decline at minus 2% or of 2% is at the lower end of the company's guidance. For Q2, they had guided for revenues to come in between minus 2 to plus 1%. So Q2 has come in at the lower end of the company's guidance. For the next quarter, that's the December quarter, October to December period, the outlook appears to have deteriorated because the company is guiding for minus 3.5 to minus 1.5%, which basically means in your best case also, revenues are going to fall, and they're going to fall by 1.5%. So that's a bit disappointing. Headcount for the company has fallen by 5,000. This has been a trend across IT companies, but for Wipro, it's the fourth consecutive quarter where the headcount has fallen. Attrition, though, has meaningfully deteriorated. Large bookings, or the overall booking numbers, though, is very, very healthy. The total bookings have come in at $3.8 billion, and the large deal TCVs has gone up by 79% on a year-on-year basis at $1.3 billion. But unfortunately, unfortunately, this pickup in order wins is not translating into revenue acceleration for IT companies, and Wipro has reported weak Q2, and it appears the Q3 guidance too has come in lower than what the street was anticipating.
All right, Rima, thanks a lot for taking us through all of those numbers. The stock also ended at the low point of trade yesterday, so let's see how it behaves today in the trading session. The other big set of numbers that came through were from Bajaj Auto. Now, this also was after market close yesterday, and the company reported what was quite an operationally strong set of numbers. The margin came in 260 basis points higher, so it came in at 19.7%. The estimate that we had was 19.3%, so it was above what we were estimating. And what was this driven by? Well, better realizations as well as a richer product mix. Now, the company's quarterly EBITDA, if you look at that, that has also surpassed the 2,000 crore rupee mark. This is actually for the first time that we've seen this kind of, move on the EBITDA. The revenue growth is in single digits, but remember, this is despite an 8% fall in the volume, and they were able to manage this on the back of price hikes that they undertook in the last quarter in Q2. That's why we saw this kind of move up in the revenue. In fact, we are going to speak with the management of Bajaj Auto as well. Rakesh Sharma, who is the executive director of the company, will be joining us at 9:30 a.m. We have a lot of questions, so remember to stay tuned for that conversation. But with that, it is time for a short break on the show. On the other side, we're tracking all of the cues from the commodity markets. Once again, there's been a move in the crude prices, so we'll talk about that on the other side. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast, and let's now bring you the latest from the ongoing conflict in West Asia. US President Joe Biden is set to address the American public later tonight after wrapping up his trip to Tel Aviv, where he reaffirmed US support for Israel as well as for Palestinians. On the ground, Israel and Hamas continue to trade blame over a deadly Gaza hospital attack that killed more than 500 people. We have NBC's Ellison Barber, who brings us up to speed with all of the latest.
President Biden met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel today. As you said, he very strongly reaffirmed the United States' support for Israel. He also talked about discussions and agreements, he says, that have been made with Israel to allow humanitarian aid to cross into southern Gaza. He was supposed to meet with the Egyptian president as well as other Arab leaders in Jordan, but that part of his trip was canceled after the explosion at a hospital in Gaza City. However, he has spoken with the president of Egypt since making that agreement with Israel on humanitarian aid, according to Egyptian officials. But we don't know exactly when the Rafah border crossing will open to allow humanitarian aid inside of southern Gaza. President Biden told reporters he's traveling with on Air Force One that he thinks that might happen on Thursday or Friday. But I will remind viewers there was a period of time a few days ago where we thought there was an agreement with Egyptian officials and others to allow that border crossing from Gaza into Egypt to open up for a period of time to allow foreign nationals to leave if they wanted to and allow humanitarian aid to go in. It did not happen. But again, President Biden saying there is an agreement for aid to be moved in. There's a lot of aid already amassed at the border there. The Egyptian Red Crescent, they say their storage units in the area near that border crossing are almost full to the brink. The only question is when and if that aid will be allowed inside to people who so desperately need it.
All right, that is the latest coming out of the situation in West Asia. Things remain extremely tense, and we are expecting that speech from President Joe Biden later tonight. But with that, let's also move on and talk about what this has meant for the entire commodities pack. We have been tracking that very closely. So Manisha joins us with that update. Manisha.
Well, thank you for that, Pavitra. So much happening, and as you said, more statements expected from the US president, and that is where the markets will take direction from. As of now, we also understand that Iran has called Muslim countries to embargo against Israel. As of now, Israel imports 250,000 barrels per day, but that comes in from countries like Kazakhstan, Iraq, Azerbaijan, which are close allies to Israel, and there is no expectation that you will see any disruption in supplies going for Israel. On the other side, it also is about U.S. issuing a 6-month license authorizing the transaction in Venezuela energy sector. Now, that also is slightly bearish prices. Is the reason that we are still holding around that $90 to $92 per barrel mark. Any further development between Israel and Hamas is what the markets will see reaction to. But the safe haven buying also has been seen in case of the gold prices. That one is trading at a near 11-week highs right now. We are looking at U.S. Fed Chair Powell's speech as well today, and markets will react to that too.
Okay, Manisha, thanks a lot for getting us all of that action from the commodity space. We're going to wind down on that note with the Asian markets sharply lower, the GIFT Nifty indicating a 110-point downtick at the start of the trading session. Thanks for tuning in. Bazaar Morning Call comes up next to take all of this action forward.